Hello, good afternoon. The Prime Minister Theresa May says she has absolute faith in the Trident nuclear missile system despite claims that an unarmed test firing veered off course. It's claimed an unarmed rocket fired from HMS Vengeance in the Atlantic Ocean shot off in the direction of the United States last year. But on the BBC's Andrew Marr programme this morning, Mrs May declined to answer if she's been made aware of the incident before a crucial vote on the future of the Trident programme in Parliament. Daniel Butcher reports.
Missile away.
This is what the launch of a Trident missile looks like. Last June, the Royal Navy carried out what it calls a routine unarmed test launch from HMS Vengeance. But according to the Sunday Times, it went wrong. The paper says the submarine was about 200 miles off the coast of Florida. It was due to fire the missile 5,600 miles to a location off the west coast of Africa. Instead, the paper says it may have veered off in the wrong direction. That was just weeks before a vote in Parliament to renew Britain's ageing Vanguard submarines. Today, the Prime Minister was asked 4 times if she had known about the alleged incident when she had made a statement on Trident to MPs last July.
The issue that we were talking about in the House of Commons was a very serious issue. It was about whether or not we should renew Trident, whether we should look to the future and have a replacement Trident. That's what we were talking about in the House of Commons. That's what the House of Commons voted for. I believe in defending our country. Jeremy Corbyn voted against it. He doesn't want to defend our country with an independent nuclear deterrent.
Prime Minister, did you know?
There are tests that take place all the time regularly for our nuclear deterrents. What we were talking about in that debate that took place was about
I'm not going to get an answer to this. Can I just ask about one other thing then?
The paper says there had been 4 previous Trident tests since 2000. In the past, the MOD has issued a press release and video of successful tests. This time it did not. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has accused the Prime Minister of not telling the public about the alleged misfiring.
I think this failure is something that ought to pause everyone for a moment and just think what happened. We understand the Prime Minister chose not to inform Parliament about this, and it's come out through the media some months later. It's a pretty catastrophic error when a missile goes in the wrong direction.
While the Ministry of Defence says the test launch was a success for the crew and the boat, it has not denied the report that the missile itself might have veered off course. It does, though, say the capability and effectiveness of the Trident missile is unquestionable. Daniel Butcher, BBC News.
The Prime Minister has also confirmed she'll visit the United States to meet President Trump on Friday, the first world leader to meet him since his inauguration. Mrs May said Britain's special relationship with the US would allow her to speak up to say she disagrees with some of President Trump's opinions. Here's our political correspondent, Susanna Mendonça.
As Britain pulls away from its ties with the European Union, it's looking to rekindle old alliances with a brand new American president.
The special relationship between the UK and the US has been strong for many years. We'll have opportunity to talk about our possible future trading relationship, but also some of the world challenges that we all face, issues like defeating terrorism, the conflict in Syria.
Comparisons will be drawn to another female British Prime Minister who forged a close relationship with a populist US president. Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were united in their free trade aims back in the 1980s, and it's been reported that Donald Trump has already referred to Theresa May as his Maggie. But no previous US president has been so unpopular with so many, in particular with women who turned out in their hundreds of thousands to protest against him in America yesterday and in cities including London. Mrs May wouldn't be drawn, though, on whether she plans to challenge Mr Trump on the things he said about women.
I think the biggest statement that will be made about the role of women is the fact that I will be there as a female Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, directly talking to him about the interests that we share.
No longer back of the queue on trade, Mrs May's focus in her talks with Mr Trump will be around building a future trade deal with the US after Britain leaves the EU.
He and people around him have also spoken about the importance of a trade arrangement with the United Kingdom, and that is something that they're looking to talk to us about at an early stage, and I would expect to be able to talk to him about that alongside the other issues I'll be discussing with him when I'm in Washington.
If Mr Trump's inauguration speech is anything to go by, though, he's more focused on protectionism than free trade, insisting he'll put America first. So critics say the government should be cautious about putting US trade ahead of an EU deal.
No trade agreement with America, however ambitious, can replace or match what we are potentially going to lose on our own doorstep in Europe.
As Brexit negotiations loom, though, Mrs May knows that she needs trade options elsewhere, and this week's meeting with the US President is a first step in that direction. Susanna Mendonça, BBC News.
At least 36 people have been killed and many more injured after a train derailed in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. Many people are still trapped in the wreckage, and it's feared the death toll could rise. It's not yet clear what caused the train to derail, but police are investigating claims the track could have been tampered with. The former president of the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, has flown into exile 22 years after taking control of the West African state in a coup. He sparked a political crisis when he refused to accept the outcome of the country's election. Jammeh finally agreed to hand over power to the winner after the leaders of neighbouring countries threatened military action. Here, many councils in England are taking far too long to determine patients' needs so they can be discharged from hospital. Guidelines say the assessment should be done within 6 weeks, but a report for the health watchdog Health Watch England has found times can be much longer. Smitha Mundasad is outside St Thomas's Hospital in central London. What more can you tell us about this, Smitha?
For weeks, we've been hearing from accident and emergencies experiencing extreme winter pressure, from hospitals that say that they can't admit people into hospital because they can't discharge people home because they don't have the social care they need at home or can't get into residential care. Now Health Watch England says there's another part of this problem. It says that people are waiting too long to get those initial assessments from local councils to see if they're eligible for care, for example, for adaptations at home, if they can no longer walk, or if they can get help getting into residential care. Their own investigation found data was extremely patchy. People waited on average between 2 days and 52 days to get that initial assessment, and then maybe months to get the care they need. In one case, they found that someone waited 2 years for initial assessment, and they're saying that things need to change. Now, it's worth noting there is no statutory time, but the local government ombudsman says between 4 and 6 weeks is reasonable in the cases that it looks into. The government says it's put in an extra 900 million of additional funding into adult social care in the next 2 years. And it says that it will challenge local authorities that do not give care in a timely fashion.
Smitha, thank you very much. Now, the time new cars are allowed on Britain's roads before they need an MOT could go up from 3 to 4 years under government proposals. The Department for Transport said safer technology and improved manufacturing means new vehicles stay roadworthy for longer. The change, which could come in from 2018, would bring Britain in line with Northern Ireland and many other European countries. Andy Murray is out of the Australian Open after a shock defeat by a player ranked 50 in the world. The world number one lost his fourth round match to Germany's Mischa Zverev in 4 sets, as Ben Croucher reports.
With Novak Djokovic out, the path for Andy Murray to win the Australian Open had become a little clearer. Blocking his path, though, was the imposing figure of Germany's Mischa Zverev, earning the biggest win of his career and arguably one of the most surprising and disappointing of Murray's. When the world number 50 took the first set, Murray knew it wasn't going to be as smooth as his progress to round 4. And although Murray levelled the match, he was fast running out of ideas. Zverev had one main idea, serve and volley, and it was a specialty he was frustrating Murray with to go a set clear again. The top seed, though, is a specialist in dealing with adversity, and he wasn't about to concede just yet. Zverev left him no choice. It's Murray's earliest exit in Melbourne in 8 years. The top 2 seeds, both gone. Who'll win the title now is anything but clear. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
And you can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news on BBC One is at 6 o'clock. Bye for now. You're watching the BBC News channel with Gavin Esler. It's about 10 minutes past 1. Mrs May will become the first foreign leader, as we've been hearing, to meet the new US president later this week when she travels to Washington. Well, I've been speaking to the former Conservative International Development Secretary Andrew Mitchell and asked him, among other things, about the significance of this visit.
Yes, I think it is, and it also underlines the fact that the United States and Britain have very close interests, have many things which we see in the same light. We have a common view, and I think it's very welcome that President Trump is deciding to reach out to his principal ally in this way.
In terms of trade, which people have been saying is the top of the agenda because we're all fascinated by Brexit and what will happen when it happens, but it's somewhat unrealistic to expect anything beyond words this week, isn't it? Because, you know, we can't actually negotiate a trade deal. We can make preparations. We can't do that for a couple of years. Who knows what things are going to be like? And Mr Trump might face a more hostile Congress in 2 years' time.
Well, you can't sign a trade deal before Brexit has taken place. That is true, but you can talk about what would be in such a deal, so you can actually put a lot of ink on the paper ahead of that. And after all, you know, America is one of the biggest trading nations in the world. We are the 5th or 4th biggest trading nation in the world. The principles which underlie an agreement between Britain and America, a free trade agreement like this, will ricochet across the rest of the world and have a big impact on other trading deals that are being reached. After all, over recent years, we've seen a move away from protectionism through the WTO and so forth towards a freer trading system, because everyone now accepts that a freer trading system enriches the rich and poor alike.
Do you think the Prime Minister will want, when the talks turn to NATO, to be quite sure that this president is behind NATO? Because he did suggest it was obsolete, didn't he, during the campaign?
Well, I think he reflected a feeling of restlessness in America, that they were paying for European security, which European nations should do more to help themselves. And on that, I think that President Trump and Prime Minister May will be in full agreement, because we have reached for the 2%, as America has, and we think other countries as part of NATO should do that. And I think that when President Trump says that he expects all members of NATO to equally share the burden and not rely on America, what he's saying is perfectly fair and proper.
On the NATO question or the defence question, I need to ask you about this Trident missile test, which clearly misfired. It was an unarmed missile. There's going to be a huge row in the Commons, isn't there?
Well, there probably is, but there are two issues here. The first issue is whether whatever caused the malfunction has been corrected or not, and it looks clear that that has taken place. And the second issue is who should have been told when. Well, I think the interests of national security would not have been served by the government telling Parliament. The government's first duty is to defend the realm, and clearly what they had to do was correct the misfunction, whatever had gone wrong. So I don't really think the government should be pilloried in any way for not having told the public about this, but clearly the public will want to know, and Parliament will want to know, that whatever was wrong has been put right.
And just a final thought about Mr. Trump. I mean, some of the headlines today have suggested this is Maggie and Ronnie, you know, going back to the Reagan-Thatcher years. However, this is a very different president, and we've got a woman prime minister who's fairly straight-talking. He has got a reputation as a misogynist and a sexist. That's why hundreds of thousands of women around the world marched about this. That could have a slight shadow on the relationship or make it a bit difficult.
Well, it won't be like President Reagan and Prime Minister Thatcher, because history never quite repeats itself. But as you say, our Prime Minister is a straight-talking woman. She's already made clear and spoken, I think, for people all around the world that the comments that he made about women are completely unacceptable. But as she equally pointed out, he has apologised for those comments. And I think it's in everyone's interest, not just in Britain and America, but all around the world, that we wipe the slate clean, that it is accepted that he is starting again, as it were, from now in that respect, and that we look forward to how Britain and America with its pivotal place in the world in terms of security and trade and values as well, that relationship now is set in the right direction. And for that reason, I think it's a very good thing that our Prime Minister is going to be the first through the door of the White House.
Andrew Mitchell there. Let's get more now on our top story, the fact that Theresa May has repeatedly refused to say if she knew about the reported malfunction of a Trident missile during a test last year, and that was before MPs voted to renew Britain's nuclear deterrent. We can speak now to Patrick Grady from the SNP, MP for Glasgow North, and obviously very close to Faslane, which is where the Trident system is based. What do you make of this? What do you think your constituents will make of it, Mr. Grady?
I think the whole thing is extremely concerning. Very serious questions need to be asked now about who knew what and when, about the nature of this malfunction, and whether it turns out that MPs were asked to make a decision on the future of the £200 billion Trident nuclear weapons system back in July without being in full possession of the facts.
But could I put to you that, look, this was a malfunction of a weapons system, and the view we just heard from the Conservatives there is that you can't expect a Prime Minister to tell the public everything about defence matters. You just can't expect that.
Well, the Prime Minister stood up in the House of Commons and said that she was prepared to authorise a nuclear strike that would kill potentially hundreds of thousands of innocent people. And if she said that to the House of Commons knowing that there had been some kind of malfunction with the existing nuclear defence system, then that is very concerning, to say the least. There are always ways of providing briefings in confidence to the various security committees of the Parliament or to have indeed delayed the vote until all the facts could have been known. So I don't accept that this should have been covered up, and I think it's very important that there is full disclosure.
People will obviously know and respect your views about the upgrade of Trident, but you could take the opposite view, which is if there's been any malfunction in the system, it just shows how important it is to spend a lot more money and get a better system.
Well, it's not just my view. 58 out of 59 Scottish members of Parliament voted against the renewal of Trident. The Scottish Parliament has repeatedly voted to oppose the renewal of Trident. There is an overwhelming consensus in this part of the world that Trident should not be renewed. If this is raising questions about the safety and security of the existing system, then it throws into question the whole purpose of having the deterrent in the first place.
And, you know, Nicola Sturgeon has been very clear about the links or potential links between Brexit and its consequences and perhaps having a second referendum. But given what you've just said about the MPs in Scotland, the MSPs too, and the preponderant view of people, do you think that this issue is something which adds more fuel to your argument for eventually some kind of referendum again on independence?
Well, of course, what I think we're seeing in this context is an increasing divergence of the vision of the future of the country. You know, do we want a country that is prepared to spend hundreds of billions of pounds on a nuclear weapons system that now we're asking very serious questions about its safety and its viability? Or do we want to put that money into the welfare and social protection of our population? And those are the serious questions that are being highlighted both by this and by the other circumstances that you're mentioning.
And just a final thought, this is something that is likely to come up both at Westminster and Holyrood, I expect, in coming weeks.
I would expect so. In the coming days, I hope the Prime Minister and certainly other ministers as well who are relevant need to appear urgently at the dispatch box in the House of Commons so that we can have full disclosure and establish the circumstances of this case and what the impact that has on the future of the Trident nuclear weapons system. And I have no doubt colleagues in the Scottish Parliament will want to make their views known loud and clear as well.
Mr Grady, thanks very much for talking to us. That's Patrick Grady there of the SNP and Member of Parliament for Glasgow North. Let's have a look at the headlines now on BBC News at coming up to 1:20. Theresa May won't say, as we've been hearing, whether she knew about a failed Trident missile test when MPs were voting to renew the weapons system. The Prime Minister confirms she'll be the first world leader to meet President Trump when they hold talks on Friday. The White House accuses the American media of dishonestly reporting the size of the crowd at Friday's inauguration of President Trump. Now, a lot of weekend sports news as usual, including Andy Murray not doing so well in Australia, unfortunately. Richard's got the details.
Unfortunately, he isn't, Gavin. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, top seed Andy Murray will have to wait another year to try and win his first Australian Open. He lost to Germany's Misha Zverev in 4 sets. With last year's winner Novak Djokovic already out, many saw it as Murray's best chance to win his first title in Melbourne. Our tennis correspondent Russell Fuller reports from there.
This was probably a greater upset than Denis Istomin's win over Novak Djokovic. Even though Misha Zverev is the 50th best player in the world according to the rankings, he's only moved through the rankings relatively recently after a succession of injury. He spent most of his time trying to earn a living on the Challenger circuit. And Murray is the world #1 who'd not dropped a set in the first 3 rounds. No one here at Melbourne Park saw this coming. How did Zverev do it? He did it with some good old-fashioned tennis, serving and volleying and returning brilliantly and keeping that very high level up to the very end, playing some astonishing tennis, and Murray's game, especially in sets 3 and 4, ultimately started to wilt. Murray plans to take some rest in February. It was a frenetic end to 2016, but he has suggested he will play for Great Britain in the Davis Cup tie against Canada in Ottawa in 10 days' time.
Dan Evans' run is also over after he lost to 12th seed Jo-Wilfried Tsonga. Evans had knocked out world #7 Marin Cilic and then Bernard Tomic as well to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam for the first time, but the Frenchman was too good. Despite taking the first set on a tie-break, Evans lost the next 3. Tsonga goes through to face US Open champion Stan Wawrinka for a place in the semi-finals. After an excellent tournament, though, Evans will climb from 51st to 45th in the world rankings.
Everybody knows how big his forehand is and his serve. It really did, yeah, sort of suck the life out of the match. Really, it was when I had some chances, he got me with that the 1-2 punch.
First set, which you won, you must have felt you were in with a great chance at that stage.
Yeah, and no, I knew I was flagging a bit. I really needed the first set and just to hold on in the second and maybe get a break, but you know I didn't break him at all today, so it's just another class player who got the better of me.
There are highlights from Melbourne on BBC Two from 5:15. Now, England's cricketers have posted a solid total in the 3rd and final one-day international against India in Kolkata. On a pitch that is providing some assistance to the Indian bowlers, England made 321 for 8 from their 50 overs. Jason Roy hit his 3rd 50 in a row, and whilst none of the batsmen could kick on and make a big score, some late big hitting from Ben Stokes has given their bowlers something to defend. India's innings is underway. A short time ago, they were 73 for 2. Having lost Ajinkya Rahane and Lokesh Rahul. Coverage, of course, available on 5 Live Sports Extra and the BBC Sport website. Football Premier League leaders Chelsea could end today as much as 9 points clear at the top of the table. They play Hull City later on, while Arsenal could go up to second if they beat Burnley. One game already underway today, and champions Leicester's awful Saints lead 2-0. Finally, England's Tommy Fleetwood has won his 2nd European Tour title, winning the Abu Dhabi Championship. He finished 17 under par, a shot ahead of US Open champion Dustin Johnson. That's all the sport for now. We shall have more for you throughout the afternoon on the BBC News Channel.
Richard, thanks very much. Now, on his first full day in office, the new President of the United States, Donald Trump, saw more than 1.5 million people take to the streets in United States cities to demonstrate against him. Some protests continued late into the night, and this is one from San Francisco. But Mr. Trump and his team have focused instead on the media's coverage of his inauguration on Friday. Despite live footage that showed smaller crowds than in previous years, the White House said there had been record numbers watching the ceremony. And the new White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, used his first briefing to accuse the American media of sowing division.
These attempts to lessen the enthusiasm of the inauguration are shameful and wrong. The president was also at the Central, as you know, the president was at the Central Intelligence Agency today and greeted by a raucous overflow crowd of some 400 plus CIA employees. There were over 1,000 requests to attend, prompting the president to note that he'll have to come back to greet the rest. The employees were ecstatic that he's the new commander-in-chief, and he delivered them a powerful and important message. He told them he has their back, and they were grateful for that. They gave him a 5-minute standing ovation at the end in a display of their patriotism and their enthusiasm for his presidency. I'd also note that it's a shame that the CIA didn't have a CIA director to be with him today when he visited, because the Democrats have chosen, Senate Democrats are stalling the nomination of Mike Pompeo and playing politics with national security. That's what you guys should be writing and covering. That this, instead of sowing division about tweets and false narratives, the president is committed to unifying our country, and that was the focus of his inaugural address. This kind of dishonesty in the media, the challenging that bringing about our nation together, is making it more difficult. There's been a lot of talk in the media about the responsibility to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I'm here to tell you that it goes two ways. We're going to hold the press accountable as well. The American people deserve better, and as long as he serves as the messenger for this incredible movement, he will take his message directly to the American people, where his focus will always be.
Well, that's the White House press secretary. Republicans overseas UK say they held London's only inauguration party on Friday. I'm joined now by the group's chair, Melise Sundstrom. Good to see you, Melise.
Good to see you.
You know, I find it difficult to believe that on day 1 or 2 of this new presidency, when Americans genuinely want to come together, and they always have done, that we're debating the size of crowds and who turned up at protest rallies and who didn't turn up at the inauguration. It is a very odd time.
It is a very odd time, and I agree with you. It is surprising that we're here on a Sunday taking time to talk about size of crowds. Obviously, there's so many policies to talk about, so many new cabinet picks to talk about. Why is this becoming an issue? And it's a challenge for how the media covers Trump and how Trump responds to the media.
It is definitely a challenge for how the media covers Trump. But just looking at those pictures, you know, Americans and the rest of us are being asked, do you believe what the White House press spokesman says or what you can see with your own eyes? And this is not going to play very well, is it? Because the facts are very against the White House line.
I think we have to look at the context of this. You know, people are doubting the press, partly because of these direct attacks against the press, but also because of false coverage with BuzzFeed and CNN and that history with the dossier. In the U.S., there was Rolling Stone and its rape case, and then, you know, was being sued over that. That ended up being a false story. So there's a history of, you know, improper reporting by the press and what's being selected. For Donald Trump, you know, many Americans have an issue with his tweets. You know, will he take his Twitter account away? There's so much content out there that people are talking about that he's providing. And I think we have to be selective in what we choose to cover, what we choose to debate on. And, you know, as a working mom, I only have so much space to talk and consider things. And I want it to be about the economy, about change, about immigration. I don't care about size of crowds, but again, I recognize the challenge that this poses.
You know, Sean Spicer is supposed to be a grown-up press secretary. To play that game rather than talk about the things that you and other Republicans I've talked to actually want to talk about is a mistake.
I agree with you on that point. I think things will evolve. I mean, this is not a typical president. He is not a seasoned politician. Remember his first debate and then look at his last debate in running for president. He's learning. There's a learning curve here. A lot of it's in presentation, you know, and sometimes in substance. But I think I have every hope to think that things are going to improve and that we will, you know, be able to carry out the agenda that we want to carry out.
What did you make of the, you know, you had a party, inauguration party. What did you make of the demonstrators, most of them women, who came out not just in the United States but in London and elsewhere?
Sure, so, and that was the next day, the day after. So I think having organized that event on Friday and having watched the events unfold on Saturday, I think Republicans Overseas UK tapped into something when it hosted its event on Friday. We expected 70 people, over 200 showed up. Clearly, people wanted a space to celebrate and, you know, not necessarily be looked down on or sneered at, and we saw that. I think on Saturday, you have to respect that movement. It was huge. You have to respect the organization of it. Clearly, they have tapped into something greater than they were. But the movement is really just more about frustration, I think. And, where people were thinking they would see harmony, I saw cacophony. What are they coming out for? We know what they're coming out against, but what are they for? And was it a women's movement or was it an anti-Trump movement? What was it really? And will they channel that into something productive? I don't know.
And just a final thought. We know that our female Prime Minister is going to meet Donald Trump with his reputation as a sexist and misogynist. Now, again, on this side of the Atlantic, we would quite like trade talks, NATO, all that stuff. And that's clearly, given what we're talking about, that's the kind of thing you would want. But there will, however, be a cloud over this just because of what he, the President, now has said in the past about women. It will be a meeting in which people will look at the sexual politics of it.
I never would have thought that. I honestly don't see it that way. I do think that there are too many really big priorities in terms of the trade deal, looking at the special relationship. The U.S. clearly really values its relationship with the U.K. We have that in that we have a named ambassador now joining China, joining Israel. These are going to be top priorities for this administration. There's a lot of mutual respect there that's been showed. I mean, we've seen that. So my focus is on the economics of it. I really want to see, a good future for the U.S. and UK and their relationship.
Well, we await Friday's headlines and Saturday morning's headlines. Maybe we can talk again.
Let's hope they're productive, yeah.
Well, thanks very much. Melise Sundstrom there from Republicans Overseas. And from Monday here on the BBC News Channel, we have a new programme covering Donald Trump's first acts as president, the Brexit effect and much more. That's 100 Days with Katty Kay in Washington and Christian Fraser in London. And it's at 7 p.m. Now, Matt Taylor has the weather. He's across the newsroom. What's going on, Matt?
Hello there, Gavin. Very good afternoon to you. Well, some parts of the UK this morning woke up to the coldest conditions in around 4 years. Writtle was one such area in Essex, but look how the day is shaped up. Weather Watcher there capturing the blue skies overhead. Lovely, crisp winter's day. It's -8 first thing here this morning. Other areas have not been so lucky as far as the sunshine's concerned. It's been pretty cloudy all day across some parts of North East Wales into the West Midlands. That was Shropshire, Ludlow in particular. We did see an area of sleet and snow here earlier on. That is now pushing its way into East Yorkshire and North East Lincolnshire. It will fizzle, but it will give a few flakes of snow over the next few hours. Away from that, a few showers West Wales, South West England, most dry. Lots of cloud across the northern half of the country, but even that's starting to break up now. And so here the frost will start to form, but the coldest conditions, like last night, East Anglia, the southeast. Unlike last night, though, fog will become more of a problem to take us into Monday morning. Fog could be just about anywhere, but the main focus areas will be through East Wales, Midlands, towards the southeast of England, where it could cause some problems on the roads at the airports first thing. Some of that fog will linger all day long, especially across the Midlands and East Anglia, but for most, even that and the morning cloud will clear to leave a sunny afternoon. Bye for now.
This is BBC News with Gavin Esler at 1:30. Theresa May won't say whether she knew about a failed Trident missile test when MPs were voting to renew the weapons system.
I have absolute faith in our Trident missiles. When I made that speech in the House of Commons, what we were talking about was whether or not we should renew our Trident.
We understand the Prime Minister chose not to inform Parliament about this, and it's come out through the media some months later. It's a pretty catastrophic error.
Trade, NATO and Brexit are to be high on the agenda as Mrs May meets Donald Trump this Friday. The Prime Minister said she wouldn't be afraid to challenge Mr Trump if he said or did anything which was unacceptable. President Trump and his team accused the media of lying about the size of crowds at his inauguration, despite aerial footage that shows they were smaller than in previous years. 1 in 5 women do not receive the life-saving smear test because they're either too embarrassed or don't think testing reduces the risk of cervical cancer. That's according to a charity. The former president of the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, has left the country after agreeing to hand over power to Adama Barrow, who defeated him in a presidential election last month. Andy Murray's hopes of winning a first Australian Open title ended with a shock defeat by world number 50, Mischa Zverev of Germany, in the 4th round. Now in BBC News, The Travel Show.